Let's do a little bit of division of fractions. So as you get a little bit older, there are some different ways to do this. Usually you start with at the elementary level and you change to least common denominators. You get a common denominator here. And so notice if I were going to do that here, I'd have 4/5 divided by 2/3. And to get a common denominator, I'm looking, this is a 5 and that's a 3, and I'm noticing that if I multiplied over here by this denominator, on top and bottom, I would be multiplying by 1, so I wouldn't really change the value of this, but I would change the way that it looks. And then notice over here, I'm multiplying by this number, and I get 5/5. So I'm multiplying this fraction here by 1, so I'm not changing the value of it, but I am changing the denominator. So this becomes an equivalent fraction of 12/15. 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15. And this becomes 10/15. So now I have a common denominator, and so now I can divide. Well, you can't really divide 10 into 12 evenly, so I'm just going to leave that. 12 divided by 10 looks like this. 12 divided by 10. 15 divided by 15 is 1. Well, at least I just have one fraction now. So I started with a problem that was a division of fractions, but now I have a problem that is just a fraction, 12/10. And it's divided by 1. So that's why I say that it's just one fraction, because if you divide something by 1, it's just that number. Now what I want to do is reduce this. So I'm looking at it and seeing that they're both even. So I realize that 2 will go into 12 6 times, and 2 will go into 10 5 times. So the answer is 1 1/5. 1 1/5, because 5 goes into 6 one time with 1 left over. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 1 more would be 6. These are equivalent. So 6/5 or 1 1/5. And so that's the way we're doing that usually very early in our mathematical careers. Of course, later on, we learn a technique, which is keep the first fraction the same, change it to multiplication, and flip the second fraction. And then you can multiply straight across, 12 out of 10, and then do the same reduction that I did over here. What would be even a little quicker is to say 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 4 2 times, and then just multiply straight across and get this 6/5 to begin with, which ends up being 1 1/5 also. So you could do it that way also. So usually in higher level mathematics, we end up doing this because it's quick. You don't have to find a least common denominator, that sort of thing. So the answer ends up being this. But just for understanding, a lot of times in the younger years, we're trying to get people just to understand division and how division works. A really simple example, not using fractions, just to remind you where this comes from, is that 6 divided by 2 is 3, because 3 times 2 is 6. So we can check division by multiplication. Another way to think about this is if you have 6 things and you divide them into groups of 2, you would have 3 groups of 2 for that. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, because if you take 6 things, dividing them into groups of 2, you're going to have 3 sets of them. So that's how division works conceptually. So to think of this problem, we perhaps would come here, and then as a little more advanced thought, we would come to this method here. But you do have to remember this technique. There are problems with everything. So I think there are problems with this technique because students forget to change it to multiplication and flip the second fraction. I mean, oh my goodness, at the high school level, that has to be taught and retaught because students will forget. The problem with this method is that a lot of high school students can't easily find a least common denominator. They have a difficult time with that. So there's just, nothing's perfect here. Dividing fractions generally is relatively difficult for those two reasons. They can't remember this technique, and they have a difficult time finding a least common denominator here. So Math is rigorous. It requires some practice. It's a skill that you practice over and over, and hopefully you improve on. Anyway, so I hope you appreciate this little brush up on division of fractions, a couple of different ways, and that you will reach out with any questions that you have about this or any other topic that you would like me to see, that you would like to see me work out for you. See ya.